Welcome to the D.Hill Report. Finally back. I was moving, so I had to move a lot of things around. But we're back. We're here for you guys. In this episode, we're talking about the Houston elections. And so let's get right into it. So like I said, welcome to the D.Hill Report. I'm D.Hill, your host. We're talking about the Houston elections. I want to go into the propositions real quick. Surprisingly or unsurprisingly, all the Texas Constitution amendments got passed. So let's go through some of the boring stuff. Proposition 1 increases the amount of residency homestead exemptions from $15,000 to $25,000. That is supposed to effectively reduce the taxes of elderly and disabled homesteads. Proposition 2 authorizes tax exemption for residency homesteads of surviving spouses of 100% to totally disabled vets who died before the law took into effect. Question, isn't 100% and totally disabled the same thing? I'm not sure why it was written that way. Proposition 3 loses the requirement that state officers elected by voters live in the state capital. Now, Proposition 4, 5, and 6 are a bunch of amendments that really we didn't need. And so here's just a couple of them up on the screen right now. We didn't really need them in the first place, but here they are anyway. And last but not least, Proposition 7 dedicates certain sales and use of tax revenue in motor vehicle sales to the State Highway Fund to provide funding for non-tolled roads. It's also supposed to reduce certain transportation-related debts, but we'll see about that one. In addition to state amendments, Harris County passed several serious road bonds, so construction workers will really be happy about that one. We're talking about a $700 million bond, so that's pretty crazy. We also had some bonds for parks and veterinary care adoption centers, as well as a flood control bond that's worth $64 million. Lastly, the city of Houston passed a proposition that reduces the number of terms of a particular office to 2, but set the total length of that term to 4 years. So if you don't like a guy, you're going to be stuck with him for 4 years. Sounds very familiar. There's only one proposition that didn't get passed. This is due to the fact that this is the only proposition that most people know about. We're talking about HERO, the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance. Now, I don't need to go into extreme detail of this ordinance. Most of the media outlets covered it. The controversy around this ordinance centers around 2 words: public accommodations. So, a lot of you guys are familiar with the commercials that ran during the election time. And so I want to take this opportunity to highlight 2 things. First thing is, if you take out the words public accommodations, you'll notice that this ordinance has nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, I'm okay with gay people, but this ordinance is a little too much. This is that same type of that subtle racism when people come out against an ordinance without actually reading the content and the substance of it. This ordinance exists across every major city other than Houston, Texas. If we're going to claim the most diverse city in the nation, then we have to act like it.
So the Constitution protects all of us, right? And our freedoms and our liberties. What's the argument for adding a city-level ordinance like this?
Well, I think it's important to note that our federal civil rights laws protect on certain bases as it relates to race, religion, national origin, and sex. But as it relates to sexual orientation and gender identity, there are no explicit protections. It's also important here in Houston that there are local remedies, that folks who face discrimination here in Houston don't have to file a federal lawsuit. That's very lengthy, it's very costly. And so Houston actually, as you mentioned earlier, is the only big city in America that is left without these protections.
We've been told that they're going to try to redraft this and try to push it again next year. So we'll see what happens with that. As far as the mayor results, we have Sylvester Turner and Bill King running in our runoff election. Sylvester Turner had about 32% of the votes, while Bill King got 25%. Now, you're probably asking, what is a runoff election? Well, runoff elections is when a candidate doesn't receive a simple majority. A simple majority is 50% of the votes. And so our runoff election is going to be held on December 12th. And so I'm pretty sure you're going to be seeing a lot of campaigns and commercials and people running out to try to grab your attention. So stay tuned, I guess. So for my final thoughts, I thought the whole voting experience was pretty interesting. I didn't actually participate in early voting. I voted on the day of the election. I found it very difficult to find where my ballot was. You had to type in the exact words inside the little key section thing. Very difficult, but I eventually found the place. Now, voter turnout, really interesting. Houston's population is roughly 2.2 million. Less than 1 million of those Houstonians are registered to vote. Out of those registered to vote, less than 270,000 casted a ballot for mayor. That's pretty insane. And so it's pretty disappointing. I don't know why it's so difficult for us to go out and vote, especially because these elections are way more important than the presidential elections. We really need to focus on these because these people affect us directly. At this section of the episode, we're going to be tossing to our first ever correspondent, Ankil Bhakta. Ankil?
Thanks, Devontae. It's great to be here. Let's transition now from the local elections to a national headline that's got a lot of you talking. Democratic presidential candidate and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders introduced legislation last week that would legalize the recreational use of marijuana. Now, currently, marijuana is on the federal list of dangerous drugs. That's the same list that heroin is on. Now, this bill, called the Ending Federal Marijuana Prohibition Act, will look to remove marijuana from that list, and it would actually give each state the decision on whether or not they want to legalize the drug for medical and recreational use. And after signing a bill earlier in the year to legalize the use of cannabis oil for epilepsy, Governor Greg Abbott said that Texas would not legalize marijuana for recreational or medicinal purposes as long as he's in office. And here's a little funny thought. According to UrbanDictionary.com, the top definition for marijuana is God's gift to mankind. Yeah, I'll let you take a second to think about that one. You might want to brace yourself for this next story. Now, Devontae is the one who wanted this one in there, so watch out. The United Nations came out with a report last week that says gas produced by decaying waste is a potential major source of energy. That's right, you might think I'm lying to you, but this is the absolute truth. The UN Institute for Water, Environment, and Health says the biogas would be worth the equivalent of $9.5 billion in non-renewable natural gas. $9.5 billion. Take another second to think about that. The energy would provide electricity for millions of homes and also improve the sanitation in numerous developing countries. So it looks like the world might actually run on poop someday. Devontae, what do you think about that?
Thanks, Ankil. Yeah, you're right. One of these days, we're going to be all full of it. Well, that's all we have for today's episode. Make sure you like, subscribe, leave some comments. If you guys have any suggestions for future episodes, make sure you let me know. And of course, stay tuned for future content and keep us in your thoughts. See you guys next time.